guys, and welcome to Quevedo Questions. Today with the incredible, the one and only Ralph Echemendia. Hey, Ralph.
Hey, Elise, how are you?
How are you? For any of you that don't know who this guy is, he is, of course, a world-renowned cybersecurity expert, one of the top guys around, also known as the ethical hacker. So today, all I wanted to know, many of you may have listened to some of his keynotes, you may have seen him on TV shows, interviews, but I wanted to get to know Ralph Echemendia a little bit more. So, Ralph, I know that your journey started at a very young age. So, can you tell us a little bit about that and how your journey started on computers?
Well, it was, I had a friend in the neighborhood, and his brother and him were into ham radio. And that was sort of the beginnings of the tech world was, understanding how radio frequencies worked and really getting interested in that. And then that same friend, Homer, a year or two later, came around with a little leaflet, if you will, like a magazine, but it still exists today, called 2600, and which is, it has to do with 2600 megahertz, which is a frequency that the phone system used to use. So that, when you put a quarter in the phone system, it would make a sound, and that's how actually the phone system was allowed to make calls back in the day. And so this little leaflet showed you how to create, a box that you could build from components of Radio Shack and then make free phone calls. So that was the beginning of it. And then a little later, he said, well, if we get a computer, then we can dial bulletin board systems in California, where there is porn. And we, of course, at the age of 14, that seemed like some research I had to do. And we then started using these phone systems and tricks that we learned for war dialing, what's called war dialing, which is dialing all these phone numbers to find these BBSs. And that was the beginning of it. I had a Commodore 64 computer, was my first computer, and you turn this thing on, and if you didn't know anything, which we didn't, you had to figure out how to make this thing work. And so that's how it began, and it was just a hobby for...
Now, 1 second, for anybody that doesn't know what a Commodore 64 is, because I remember that as well. I was a kid, and it was literally a keyboard that you would plug into a TV, and then you had this little cassette tape thing, and many of you, the young kids listening, don't even know what a cassette thing is. But yes, Commodore 64 was just a keyboard, pretty much. And so,
yes, correct. And then you had this modem, and you put the phone on the modem, and it would dial. It's kind of the days of War Games, if anybody's seen that movie. So that's how it started, and it was a hobby for a while. And the PC era, 286s and 386s came in, and and we moved to that. And it was a hobby for most of my young life until about the age of 19. I went to go get a job, a 9 to 5, if you will, and I got a job as a secretary because I knew how to use WordPerfect and DOS. And I worked for a public relations agency who actually managed Lexmark. And it was there that I met, IBM engineers and others, showed them some tricks, and they were like, wow, where do you work? I was like, over at the PR agency as a secretary. And they were like, why? So that started my IT career, and went to work at Oracle for some time. I had no idea what Oracle was at the time, and I got access now to all kinds of commercial systems that I had never had access to before, like Sun Microsystems and HP and so on. So that was sort of the path, and security was not even a word. It was never even used. So it wasn't until many years later that the issue of security came up. And I worked at a hospital at the time, deploying a mission critical system, which was the the charting system for the hospital, for a children's hospital, and I found many flaws in that system that could potentially end up killing somebody. So um, that was the sort of the first type of professional research that I did in the security space that led to the word security being used in my title. And my title was changed at the time from point of care system administrator to security officer. And I thought it was kind of funny because I didn't get a uniform or a gun or anything. So it's the same title as the guy who stood by the door. But that's when security started playing a part, and firewalls didn't exist yet. So then the firewall, then of course the industry as we know it now, cybersecurity, started to grow from that. It was sort of I think in its infancy stage at that point, and I think now it's sort of a teenager.
Wow. What an incredible journey to kick off. And like you said before, security, it wasn't either a true cybersecurity because the internet was not truly around. So how do you go? Because there is a very big jump from cybersecurity expert and, most people think of, this hacker or this nerd or this professor at a university, and you're definitely not that at the moment. You also, after working for these companies and making your way up, you made your transition into Hollywood. Hence, later on, becoming the ethical hacker, this cool guy who works in movies, and you've got now a link to the entertainment industry. So how do you go from just being a normal security networks person to jumping to not only the Hollywood scene, but then also the music and entertainment, and making this a part of what your brand is as the ethical hacker?
Well, I think my first of all, my true passion and love was for music first. My parents are both musicians, and uh, I was always surrounded by music as a child. Uh, I was always introduced to music by my parents, and before I actually, like I said, the computers were a hobby, and my first entrepreneurial business was actually I was a DJ, and I provided sound systems in Miami to mostly Latin bands. Right, I'm Cuban, so very Cuban community type of parties, 15s and weddings and things like that. And then I sort of graduated to doing sound engineering for live bands at some of Miami's biggest clubs at the time. And this is when Miami was just turning, especially South Beach was just becoming a popular place. It's just a bunch of old people hanging out back in the day when I was a kid, and then it started to transform itself to what we know South Beach to be now. So I used to do sound at two or three of the biggest clubs in South Beach, and so that was still, something I love to do. But as I got older and later got married, I was like, this is sort of a bit of a difficult business in some ways, and that's how I ended up being a secretary. Um, but so music has always had a place in my life, and then my daughter is a musician now, um, so it's sort of come back again, and it's always been there. But that is also how, interestingly enough, I ended up in Hollywood, is because one of my friends in Miami is Damian Marley, Bob Marley's son, and basically having access to being in the studio with him and seeing the process, the creative process. Um, then I asked a lot of questions about how things worked from a computer perspective. Where does the music go? What are these programs? How do these programs work? And sort of more at a lower level than the way that engineers are using it, right? So um, that then gave me access to. At the time, I was doing some work for a private intelligence company, and dealing with a lot of legal cases, sort of as a forensic expert as well. And I got a call that there was an issue with a little known rapper from Detroit named Eminem, and and that I was the person to be able to handle it because it was in the studio environment. And even though the rest of the investigators are generally more of like ex-FBI or prosecutors and things like that, it's not the sort of vibe that runs well in those places. So that led me to work on that case, which introduced me to a lot of different people. And then right almost immediately after, then there was this movie called Twilight that got hacked. And even before that, basically, I was having to be in LA a lot, dealing with these sort of entertainment cases. And so I started to realize that I kind of belonged more in LA than I did in Miami, and eventually moved to LA after the company I worked for got bought by Verizon. And that's kind of what started it. Once you're here, then all of a sudden now you're surrounded by the industry and people, and there just really wasn't too many of us who had the technical capabilities and expertise, but also had the ability to deal with these creatives in a social way. Um, and that's key to the process of these investigations. So from there, it uh, sort of spiraled further in. I met Oliver Stone very early on, and then he asked me to be part of the crew, meaning working with the writers and working with him on a movie called Savages, and then from there a movie called Snowden. And it just I got deeper and deeper and more involved in the process, working very closely with the director, the actors. It changed from purely doing the computer aspect of a service, providing a service that way, to actually being part of the creative process. So that's kind of how it happened, and then now I'm still involved in multiple projects here in Hollywood that are in the works, that are all either scripted television or non-scripted in some way, or podcasts. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And then also sort of involved with my daughter's career and a label with a number of other artists from around the world. So I'm back into music and back into film, uh, back into the creative side, while still being involved in tech. And I think it's very important to realize that these things are really all together. They're not separate, because the entire entertainment industry now is the content is created in a computer. It's edited on a computer. It's recorded on a computer. Everything is happening now in a digital way. So it's all just files. And so all of the same issues that apply to data that we worry about apply here. And especially when the investment is in the hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes.
Sure. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today. Obviously we've known each other for a few years now. And when I go to events sometimes, or when I talk to the community in the tech world, when it comes to cybersecurity, everybody thinks again of this boring, long as kind of I have to study a lot. And I'm sure that many people meeting you or maybe listening to this and understanding how you started and then where you got to and how you can actually use cybersecurity for the movie industry or for the music industry might get inspired. But if I remember correctly, you said the cybersecurity industry, it is a zero unemployment industry because there aren't enough experts. So there might be many kids out there, or even the older generation, that go, well, I want to be a hacker, or I want to be a cybersecurity expert. I want to work in Hollywood. What advice do you have for these people? Because this is not something like any other job where you can actually become an expert learning in 2 years, for example. This is actually, there is a lot of intricate kind of learnings and skills that you need to acquire if you want to be at the elite level like yourself. So for any kids or young people out there, or even people in their maybe 20s or 30s, what would you say is the key for somebody to get in the industry, maybe the way that you are doing? not just, to create manuals for companies, but to be more on this creative and cultural market that we're kind of having now, because the tech world with culture are kind of mixing. They're doing a crossover now. And security is more important than ever. You mentioned the Snowden, but all the hacks that happen with very big movies like, The Expendables 3 and all these other things that have happened, Twilight. So what is your advice, or what have you seen happening over the last few years, or why is it that there is still zero unemployment in this industry? Why aren't enough people jumping on this?
Well, there certainly has been a lot of people jumping on this, like you said, both from the younger generation, which I think is the strongest generation. Every younger hacker is going to be better than me, and that's the way it's supposed to be, as far as their technical capabilities and knowledge base. If it's something that they really are sort of born with, it is to some degree a talent. Uh, Similar to that of a musician or an actor or whatever, in the sense that you neither have it or don't have it, and you can basically, like a musician, you can learn to play the piano, but you're not going to play the piano like Jimmy. And that there's that's what I mean by you neither have it or don't have it. However, the cybersecurity industry it's a large one, right? It's not just, say, ethical hacking or penetration testing is a specialization within it. There are all kinds of other specializations, from forensics to, and now new things, crypto forensics, to authentication and authorization systems, and all these different elements of the what make up cybersecurity. So the thing is that let's pretend that we had a massive surge of people, multiple people. Let's say we had 10, 20, 30 times the number of people who are going into this space. You still have a zero unemployment rate, because the number of devices, the number of systems, the amount of technology being used today, there's no way that we can actually keep up with those numbers. There's just not enough people. So even if, let's say, 400 million people were to join the cybersecurity workforce, that is still a fraction of the billions of devices that they would have to be responsible for. So it's just going to continue to be a zero unemployment industry for a very long time. So it certainly is something that, and there's so many different ways to go. You can get into the network side of things. You can get into the application side of things, programming. So, and each one of those, paths then has multiple paths within it. So, my suggestion is anyone who likes computers, likes to work with them. I mean, some people are just not made for computers, in the sense that they are either intimidated by them or find them to be complex. But the truth is, they're really not. They're really simple, dumb machines that do what you tell them to do. And so, if you know how to tell them to do something, they will do it. And so that's kind of what the issues around cybersecurity is there's so many technologies that someone with a reasonable knowledge base can very easily bypass a lot of things by telling ultimately the computer to do something it wasn't programmed to do. But the suggestion is just get into it. We have so much access to information online. The truth is, it's all there. So whatever you want to research, you can get into, and it just takes time. There's what is it, 10,000 hour rule, 10 years, whatever. And yes, this is certainly one that, not that it takes 10 years, but the experience certainly is important, and the time that you put into it is. So, as nerds, I spent, so many hours in front of a computer, and instead of playing a video game, which I played video games as well, but I found that playing with the computer was a game itself, and what I can make it do. So if you're somebody like that, then it comes to you organically and naturally. Um, then you should go further down that road and figure out what it is that you like, because there is, like I said, no shortage of work in this area.
And I will definitely add to that be passionate for what you're trying to do. Like we said, cybersecurity, I mean, what Ralph does, what you do, it's exciting because you're working in these multiple industries. So you can go from obviously teaching at a university or advising a corporate company to now advising in Hollywood. But don't get into this space just because, oh, maybe I can work in Hollywood, but actually do it like Ralph said. If you've got an interest in computers, you may not have to be the top expert, but you can maybe access one of the arms or branches of what cybersecurity is. Now, looking back at how or when you started, when you were, for example, 14, 15 years old, and looking at now with the influence of social media and these new technologies, how do you think that has impacted the hacking world? Has social media and these new technologies made it easier for the bad hackers to have access? And what are the advantages for the white hackers? Because there's obviously pros and cons to everything. So what do you see?
Well, the emergence of all these technologies over the period of time, from when I started pre-internet and then post-internet and now post-social media madness world, um, a lot of the issues haven't changed. Technology has evolved, and there's a lot more technology now than there was then. So, and that goes, like you said, both in both. It's a double-sided sword, a double-edged sword here, in that it brings a lot of good things, and along with it brings a lot of risks and a lot of vulnerabilities to the forefront of our lives. So, for example, social media now controls people's lives. It really does truly control people's lives. Many people depend on it as for their life. Take the great majority of these Instagram type of models.
Yeah.
They're literally Instagram models. They're not models. They're Instagram models. So their entire world depends on Instagram. If Instagram is down for 2, 3 days, they can't do business. They can't sell. Yeah, they can't sell themselves. They don't even know where the pictures are other than on Instagram. So, it has created industries. It's created all kinds of worlds. Living here in Hollywood, I know at least a dozen people who make a living from YouTube or from social media, who I don't know who they are, right? Because it goes into very niche markets and niche groups of people. And so, on the one hand, that's great, I think, because it's just it's the sort of thing that people like and enjoy in whatever way. On the flip side of that, like I said, I've had to handle cases where people's Instagrams or Facebooks or social media accounts have been compromised and then used in a way that can really truly affect their life in a negative way. Um, so it's just, we're so dependent on technology now, more so than when I started, for sure, that in itself is a big vulnerability in people's lives. And at the same time, their lives wouldn't be what it is without it. So it's an interesting it's an interesting situation we live in with all this. But
It
from a
is.
cybersecurity perspective, the truth is the growth of technology use by all of us. Obviously, even with new technologies in cybersecurity being developed and being used, still continues to sort of outpass, because of the size continues to grow, that we don't really get any safer most of the time. We kind of stay in this vulnerable place, because every time that we're purely reactive, and every time that we deal with something that happened, there are so many unforeseeable things that
Yeah.
are still yet to happen, that the truth is, the risk just never seems to get better.
Wow. Now, you've mentioned earlier about the vulnerabilities. For example, when you mentioned the Instagrammers, so, that's now how, for example, hackers, they hack accounts or they target people that are obviously maybe making more money or they've got certain pictures or whatever. And from a parent, you're a parent now, obviously your kids are grown up now, but there are many parents with younger children. And one of the questions that they say is, how can I protect my child from the cyber nastiness that is out there and from this world that is quite unknown? For example, from a 10, 11, 12 year olds that back then when we were 10, 11, 12, we didn't have to worry about these things. But now what we think for us is kind of a safe place. What advice do you have for those parents? What can they do, or what can they look out for when they
Well,
have children?
it's the same old parenting issue as the past. Oftentimes, parents don't even know what their kids are up to and what they're doing. In the let's say in the old days before any of this, kids, were for the most part allowed to take off and not be seen for hours, and they have their little adventures. Now they're having their adventures online, and it is a very different environment because if you recall, we were all told as kids, don't talk to strangers. If
Yes.
you don't know someone, then you know, uh, don't
Ranger,
talk to them.
ranger, magical phrase. I think,
Exactly. Well, that's not the case online, right? At all. On the contrary, we want to have as many Instagram followers that we don't know, and they're following our lives. And so there's this psychological disconnect, if you will, that the moment that we're in front of a screen the way that we are, uh, something clicks off, and all of a sudden, all those things that uh, are supposed to be sort of common sense in a physical space, in a physical environment,
oh,
are gone. And so, like I said, you know it's positive and negative because that world is for the most part how I know I've known people for over 20 years I've never met, and I don't even know their names, and I don't know where they live, I don't know what color they are, I don't know what religion they are, and I don't care. We have a relationship that's purely based on information and communication. So that's a good thing. On the flip side, when you're a young child, it's a bit of a dangerous place because I'll give you an example. Like TikTok right now, is very hot with a much younger generation, and you have 12, 13-year-old girls who you wouldn't know they're 12 or 13 years old because they're all made up and they're all don't look like they're 12 or 13 years old. And then you have them having a million different followers on that, communicating with people who are obviously not even teenagers.
yeah,
So, um, so that can bring some risks, right? So the advice for parents is sort of to be aware of what these things are. Great majority of parents don't know what TikTok is. A
yeah,
great majority of parents don't know what a number of different messaging platforms are that are kind of known for being used by pedophiles or things, people that are, again, not, they don't have good intentions. So it's the same, it's really the same. The only difference is that instead of it being in a physical space, you kind of have to be aware of what your kids are doing and talk to them about it, and also realize that where certain parents come from, um, they wouldn't even understand this. So it's not just to say you're banned from using these things, because that is oftentimes what fuels the youth. Um, the moment you say no, that means why not, and I'm definitely going to do it now. So it's not a matter of just saying no to technology and no to these platforms, but it's a matter of just talking to your kids and being making them aware of the dangers. But it's very much a parental and child relationship that you know oftentimes didn't exist before the internet, and certainly is not existing now because the parents are over on their phone on Facebook. So it's get off your phones and talk to each other.
Is there a good point? Is there anything that we can do? For example, we all use our cell phones, and especially the young children. So how do we actually protect ourselves and our data, because we do so much, or especially younger kids, they don't read terms or conditions, or they don't know what an application is, and they download so many things that can put a tracker on your phone or a blog. Is there anything that can help for anyone to have a little bit more peace of mind in regards to what's going on our cell phones? Because most people now do everything, but we just automatically trust because it's our smartphone. This is what we're growing up with now. And technically, there are more vulnerabilities here in a cell phone because of what we do versus them talking to a stranger face to face. So is there anything that we can do?
Well, it's a tough one, to be honest with you, because, these things are made for just, immediate use by the consumer. And like you said, there's an implied trust that happens. I'd love to be able to say that, hey, if we put it in a physical term, it'd be like saying, okay, well, then everybody needs to learn Kung Fu. Everybody needs to learn some martial arts to protect yourself. But the truth is, does everyone in the world know martial arts? No. And even if they did study martial arts, you have a professional come in, they're going to kick your ass. So it's kind of the same thing here applied to technology. I'd love to say, yeah, everyone should have a certain basic level of technology to be able to determine and ascertain trust on the things that they download and the things that they use. You said, children didn't, or the younger generation doesn't necessarily read the terms and conditions. Well, the truth is nobody does, other than lawyers, right? So it was written by lawyers and it's read by lawyers. It's not read by consumers. And so we all just said, okay, even if the terms and conditions are pretty much saying, I'm going to track you, I'm going to follow everything you do, and I'm going to use it to market, to make your user experience better. But the definition of what that is up to the companies who do this, and not, you're not given the choice. So that's the thing. It leaves us in a space where the choice is use technology or don't. Correct. Right. So it's a difficult one. Like I said, all I can say is certainly become more aware and question everything, look into these things, and then make a determination on whether
maybe don't be so trusting. And yes, because I remember from the many times that I've heard you speak, or you say that the average person takes, what is it, 229 days or something before you've been hacked, or
it's gone down to 206 days.
106.
So it takes 206 days before you've been hacked on average, and that's a long time, right? And that's the problem, is by that time, you had more than enough time to extract all the data, because that takes time. We also have way faster connectivity than when I got started over a modem. Yes. We now have all of these technologies, and with like 5G and 6G and all these things that are going to come out, it's fast. We can now download and transfer massive amounts of data very quickly. But so in 206 days, you obviously can download the entire, take the Sony hack as an example. Yeah. The entire company could be taken, and you do, if you don't even know until 260 days later, you really don't have much you can do.
So basically, be a little bit more aware of how you use the technology, your smartphones. Remember, even again, that sentence, stranger danger. Not every person online is definitely a friend. Like Ralph said, right now everybody's worried about how many more followers do you have, and if you were on the street and you had 20 strangers following you, I'm pretty sure it's not the same as if they follow you on Instagram and Twitter, but technically the danger kind of still be there. So obviously I would love to talk to you for more hours, and we'll definitely do follow-up videos. So I've got 2 more questions left for you today. And one of them is, what are some of your most memorable moments within your career so far when it comes to being the ethical hacker? You know, whether they are Hollywood stars or from around the world. Give me 2 or 3 examples of some moments that you truly go, wow, how lucky I am to be doing what I do.
Well, some are, there's the ones that are more, sort of entertaining, if you will. One of the things that in this field that I did quite a bit was, what they call social engineering, because, well, the technical part is extremely important and the real deal. The thing is, the most vulnerable thing is people and people not following procedures and protocols. So I often had to go in and basically break the people and break into the people. And one of those was this is a good one. I had to break into a very large U.S. corporation with a lot of security. And by the end of that, in a matter of a week, I was sitting at a cubicle, and everybody thought I worked there, and I didn't. And so that, those moments where you're just sitting there going, this is hilarious that I can do this and get away with it, and being paid for it and not being able to get in trouble for it. So that was one that was a very memorable hack. This one company, and then some of the others, obviously, since working in Hollywood, have been in working with Oliver Stone was certainly a trip, and an experience. Working on a Snowden project was also quite an experience, and spending time overseas a lot. I'd say another very memorable moment was pulling off what I pulled off at Web Summit, which
I remember.
something I always wanted to do, was figure out how to mix and blend the entertainment industry with the tech industry, and having like Rosario Dawson and Saul Guy and Saul G, all these, that was, finally things that we were talking about, in the living room, we were able to take it to an audience of thousands of people.
Sure.
So those were some of my most memorable times, for sure.
I gotta say, the Web Summit, I do remember that, and I was actually as part of that team for the Web Summit with Ralph, and yeah, they're very good moments from.
Yeah, there you go. We got some stories for sure.
I think we need another video of just Web Summit stories, and I will leave one of them to the hashtag Cujo moment. But I will not know what that is. So we'll leave that story for another day. So then my last question for you today, what's next for Ralph Echemendia at the moment? Obviously, I know some things they're hush-hush, so you can't say anything right now, but what are you excited about that is coming up in the world of the ethical hacker?
Well, obviously, there's obviously continued projects in the technology side. I started Seguru a couple of years ago, and seeing where that's going to shift and go, which is my passion and attempt at addressing these issues for everyone. But oftentimes, people want to have to change in some way, or learn more about it, right? So continuing to figure that out and be able to make everyone safer is a passion, and I think working on these entertainment projects is the most powerful thing in many ways, because of the reach. It reaches everyone around the world, and you being able to embed myself into the process of creation of content, then allows me to somewhat educate people in that way, through entertainment. Um, Also very excited about my daughter's musical career, as she's now taking taking steps in sort of the bigger stages, and that's a lot of fun too. You were also part of another event we did at Money 2020 in Amsterdam, where again I tried to, how do I blend this in, and had her write a song and perform a song about privacy. Well, that's a lot more powerful than the 5,000 words that we may be using
Correct.
speaking at a podium. So just just going with the flow of all of these different things, and hopefully bringing more value to the world.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Ralph, and for what Ralph just spoke about his daughter and about Money 2020. Anyone that didn't see that talk, or how Hennessy, his daughter, was brought into this and the song that she sang, I'll probably share the link below as well for anyone that wants to click on that, because for those that know the tech world, Money 2020 is obviously a very financial driven event, very suited and booted, and banks and very serious people. And then you had the Ralph Echemendia crew showing up and making noise, and everyone like, who the heck are these people? And then Ralph jumps on a stage, Hennessy jumps on a stage, and the audience was obviously like blown away. So yes, definitely I'll be talking to you again. Let's do a few more little talks so that we can share more in the life of Ralph Echemendia and some of your insights, because it is impossible to compress your knowledge into little sound bites of videos. So once again, thank you so much, Ralph, for joining me today, the incredible ethical hacker. We'll see you guys very soon. This is Elise Quevedo. See you next time.